I knelt beside his grave until my legs lost all feeling, until the cold granite under my palms felt warmer than my own flesh. For half a year, I had woken to silence. For 6 months, I had reached across the bed to find nothing but empty sheets where my husband once slept. For 180 days, I had relearned how to fill my lungs without him beside me. Or so I believed. That morning, I went to the market because sorrow doesn't fill an empty refrigerator. I found myself in the canned goods aisle, staring at endless rows of beans and broth, marveling at how the world continued spinning so ordinarily when mine had ground to a halt. I reached for a jar of marinara, and that's when I heard it. His voice. Not shouting my name, just that familiar sound carried by decades of habit, a soft throat clearing, followed by a muttered grumble about the price of bread. The exact cadence I had listened to for 41 years. The sound that used to drift from the den while he read the morning news. The sound I had sworn I'd never hear again. My hand froze midair. I turned slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs, as if my body understood the impossible truth before my mind could accept it. And there he stood, 3 shelves away, holding a shopping basket, squinting at labels exactly as he always had. Richard. The same broad shoulders now slightly stooped with age, the same silver hair that defied every comb, the same scar slicing through his right eyebrow from the ladder accident he joked about for decades. The man I had buried. The man whose name was etched in stone. The jar slipped from my fingers. It exploded against the tile, red sauce splattering like fresh blood. People gasped. Someone called out, "Ma'am, are you all right?" I didn't answer. My feet were already moving. "Richard," I cried, my voice cracking like shattered glass. "Richard, it's me." He turned. For one terrible, hopeful heartbeat, I expected recognition. I expected shock. I expected his face to illuminate the way it always had when he saw me after a long day apart. Instead, he looked confused. Genuinely confused. "I'm sorry," he said slowly, carefully, as if addressing someone unstable. "I think you've mistaken me for someone else." The words hit harder than seeing him. Mistaken. As if 4 decades could be mistaken. As if I hadn't memorized every line of his face in the darkness of our bedroom. "No," I whispered, stepping closer. "No, Richard. It's me. Margaret. Your wife." He took a step backward. That movement wounded me more than anything. Richard had never retreated from me, not once, not even during our most bitter arguments. "My name is Robert," he said. "Robert Miller. I don't know you." His voice was the same, deep, slightly gravelly, the voice that had whispered love into my ear on quiet nights when words seemed insufficient. I fumbled for my phone with trembling hands and pulled up a photo from last summer, his final birthday, both of us on the porch, his arm draped around my shoulders. I held it between us like a shield. "Look," I pleaded. "Look at this. Remember? You burned the steaks and blamed the grill." He glanced at the screen. For just a moment, something flickered in his eyes. A pause too long. A tightening of his jaw. Then he shook his head. "I'm sorry," he repeated. "I've never seen that photograph. You must be experiencing something very difficult." He placed a hand on my shoulder. That touch nearly broke me. It was his hand, the same warmth, the same weight, the same spot he always touched when he wanted to soothe my anxiety. "Please," he continued gently. "You should sit down. Get some water." I stared at his left hand. "Show me your fingers," I said suddenly. He frowned but lifted his hand. And there it was, the crooked pinky, the one he'd broken at 15 while repairing his mother's roof. The one I used to tease him about when we held hands. My stomach dropped through the floor. "I have to go now," he said quickly, already turning away. "I truly hope you feel better." Just like that, he walked away. I stood there shaking while an employee mopped the mess at my feet. People averted their eyes. Someone murmured, "Poor woman." They were wrong. I wasn't poor. I was terrified. Because as I watched him disappear toward the registers, one thought screamed louder than my grief ever had. If my husband was alive, then who lay buried in his grave? And whatever the answer, I knew my life was about to fracture in ways I couldn't yet comprehend. I should have left the store. I should have driven home, locked the door, and convinced myself that grief had finally shattered something inside my mind. That would have been easier. Cleaner. But I didn't leave. I watched him from the end of the aisle as he paid for his groceries. He used cash. I noticed because Richard always used his card and complained about keeping receipts. This man didn't take one. He folded the bills carefully, pressing the edges flat with his thumb exactly as my husband used to do. My chest constricted, each breath shallow and insufficient. When he pushed his cart toward the exit, my feet moved without permission. I followed at a distance, ducking behind displays, pretending to examine products I'd never buy. I felt ridiculous and desperate and painfully awake all at once. Outside, the afternoon sun hit my face like a slap. He loaded his groceries into an old sedan, white paint faded by years, a dent in the rear door. Not the car Richard owned, not the one he'd polished every Sunday. Still, the way he placed the bags inside was unmistakable. Heavy items first, bread on top, eggs last. I memorized the license plate without realizing I was doing it. He pulled out of the lot and drove away. I stood there for a few seconds, hands clenched at my sides, then walked to my own car, the one Richard had bought me 2 years before the accident, insisting I needed something safe, something reliable. I followed him. I stayed 3 car lengths back, close enough not to lose him, far enough not to be seen. My heart pounded so loudly I feared he'd hear it. We passed streets I knew, then turned into neighborhoods I rarely visited. The houses grew smaller, older, more modest. He slowed and turned onto a quiet street lined with maple trees and low wooden fences. He parked in front of a simple house painted a soft sage green, the kind of color meant to feel welcoming. A white picket fence framed a tidy yard. Wind chimes hung near the porch. He stepped out with his grocery bags. Then the front door opened. A woman appeared, mid-50s, perhaps younger than me by a decade. Dark hair pulled back, no makeup, wearing a cardigan that looked well-worn. She smiled when she saw him, not a polite smile, a familiar one. She leaned in and kissed his cheek. My vision blurred. She took one of the bags from his hands, speaking to him softly. I couldn't hear the words, but I recognized the intimacy, the ease, the comfort of shared routines. Then 2 children burst through the doorway, a boy and a girl, around 8 and 10. They ran straight toward him, arms wide. "Grandpa," the girl shouted. "Did you bring the ice cream?" He laughed. That laugh. The sound hit me like a physical blow, lopsided and warm. The laugh I'd heard in our kitchen for decades. The laugh I thought I'd never hear again. He crouched down, letting them climb on him, balancing grocery bags with practiced skill. The woman watched, smiling, her hand resting lightly on his back. They all went inside together. The door closed. I sat frozen in my car, parked halfway down the street, hands gripping the steering wheel. Sunlight streamed through the windshield, warming my face. Only then did I realize I was crying. Not sobbing, not gasping, just steady tears sliding down my cheeks. 41 years of marriage. 6 months of mourning. Nights spent alone, whispering his name into the darkness. And he was here, alive, laughing, holding children who weren't mine. I took out my phone and began taking pictures. The house, the car, the address number beside the door. My hands shook so badly some photos blurred, but a few were clear enough. As the light began to fade, I started my car and drove away. I don't remember the drive home, only sitting in my garage afterward, staring at my phone, zooming in on his face again and again. Every line matched. Every shadow. When I finally went inside my empty house, a single question echoed louder than anything else. If Richard was alive, then who had I buried? I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table with a single lamp burning, the rest of the house swallowed by darkness. My phone lay beside old photo albums spread open like evidence at a crime scene. I moved between them slowly, deliberately, as if speed might snap whatever fragile thread held me together. I zoomed in on the photos I'd taken that afternoon, his face as he turned toward the house, his profile through the car window. Then I looked down at pictures from our past. Our wedding day, his first gray hair, a beach photo from years ago where his shirt had ridden up slightly. Every detail matched. The scar above his eyebrow from the ladder fall. The small mole near his collarbone he'd hated because it made him self-conscious. Even the slight unevenness in his ears that only I ever noticed. These weren't things grief invented. These were facts etched by time. I pressed my fingers to my lips to stop them from trembling. Twins didn't share scars. Strangers didn't share memories written into flesh. I stood and paced the house, my footsteps echoing in rooms that suddenly felt unfamiliar. This place was supposed to be my sanctuary, the home Richard left me. Now it felt like a stage set built on a lie. At 3:40 in the morning, I stopped pacing and picked up my phone. I called my son. It rang once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th ring, Derek answered, his voice thick with sleep. "Mom, do you know what time it is? I need you to come over. Right now." A pause. "Mom, it's the middle of the night. Did something happen?" "Yes," I said. "Something happened." Another pause. Longer this time. "Mom, if this is about Dad again, we've talked about this. You've been through so much. Grief can do strange things." "I saw him yesterday," I said. "I saw your father alive." Silence, then a sharp intake of breath. "Mom, what did you take? Did you miss your medication?" "I followed him home, Derek. I saw where he lives. I saw his family." My voice didn't shake. That seemed to scare him more. "Stay there," he said finally. "Don't go anywhere. I'm coming." The call ended. I went to the bathroom and studied my reflection. I barely recognized the woman staring back, dark circles under my eyes, hair pulled back without care, a face that looked older than it had 6 months ago. When Derek arrived 40 minutes later, he didn't knock. He let himself in, just like he had as a teenager. He found me back at the kitchen table, surrounded by photos. "Mom," he said softly. "What's happening?" I handed him my phone first. I didn't speak. I watched his face as he scrolled. At first, confusion. Then disbelief. Then something else. Fear. He swallowed hard and handed the phone back. "He looks like Dad," he said carefully. "But people look alike. It happens." "Did you see his hand?" I asked. "The finger." Derek rubbed his face. "Mom, we buried Dad. You were there. I was there. Everyone was there." "A closed casket," I said quietly. He looked away. "They said it was better that way. The accident was bad." "Did you see his body, Derek?" His jaw tightened. "No. Neither did I." The room felt suddenly very small. "I want to go back there," I said, standing. "I want you to come with me." "Mom, this isn't healthy. Are you coming or am I going alone?" He hesitated long enough for the truth to begin cracking through the surface. "Fine," he said finally. "We'll go so you can see it's not him. So you can let this go." We left in silence. As we turned onto the quiet street with the sage green house, my heart began to race again. "That's the one," I said. Derek parked a short distance away. We sat there watching. After a few minutes, the front door opened. The man stepped out. Derek leaned forward. The color drained from his face. He stared, unmoving, as the man walked to his car and drove past us. When I looked at my son, tears were streaming down his cheeks. "Mom," he whispered. In that moment, before he said another word, I knew whatever truth he'd been carrying was finally breaking him, too. Derek didn't start the car. He sat there gripping the steering wheel, his forehead pressed against it, shoulders shaking. I'd seen my son cry before, when his first marriage collapsed, when his dog died, but never like this. This wasn't grief. This was collapse. "Mom," he said finally, his voice cracking. "I'm so sorry." Those words landed with terrifying clarity. Sorry meant guilt. Sorry meant knowledge. Sorry meant this was never just in my head. "Tell me," I said. My voice sounded distant even to myself. "Tell me right now." He lifted his head and looked at me. His eyes were red, raw, filled with something I'd never seen in them before. "Shame. Dad didn't die in that accident." The words hung between us, heavy and final. I didn't scream. I didn't gasp. Some part of me had already crossed into a place where shock could no longer reach. I simply nodded once. "Go on." He took a deep breath, as if preparing to dive underwater. "He had another family, Mom. For a long time. Over 20 years. That woman you saw, Valerie, he lived with her part-time. He said it started as a mistake, then it just never ended. I stared straight ahead at the empty street. How long have you known? About 3 years, Derek admitted. I found out by accident. I was helping him with paperwork from the marine supply business. I saw duplicate bills, utilities, insurance. 2 households. The marine supply business. The job that kept him traveling constantly. The job I defended to friends when they said he was gone too much. And you said nothing. He wiped his face with his sleeve. He begged me not to tell you. He said it would destroy you. He said if you found out, you'd take half of everything, the business, the house, everything he built. Everything we built, I corrected. Derek nodded miserably. 6 months ago, he came to me with a plan. He said he wanted to end the double life and be with her for good. But if he divorced you, he'd lose too much. So he decided it would be easier if you thought he was dead. My hands began to shake. Easier for whom? For him, Derek whispered. And for me. I turned to him sharply. For you. He looked away. If he died, everything passed to me automatically. The business, the assets, the accounts. He transferred most of the money to himself first, under a different name. The rest came to me. I thought I could take care of you, give you an allowance, make sure you were okay. An allowance. Like a child. Like a stranger. How did he fake it? I asked. My voice was eerily calm. Derek swallowed. There was a man. A homeless man, terminally ill. No family except a niece he never saw. Dad paid him. Paid the niece. They staged an accident. Dad used his documents. The man died in the hospital under your husband's name. The body was badly damaged. The casket stayed closed. The world tilted beneath me. I remembered the phone call from the police. Derek insisting I not see the body. The funeral I'd sobbed through while people held my hands and told me how strong I was. You let me bury a stranger, I said. Yes. You let me mourn him. Yes. You watched me fall apart for 6 months. Derek broke down completely. I didn't know how to stop it once it started. I thought if enough time passed, you'd heal. That it would be kinder this way. Kinder? I laughed then, a short, humorless sound. You stole my right to the truth. You stole my grief and replaced it with a lie. I closed my eyes, breathing slowly, carefully. Take me home, I said. Mom, we need to talk about this. Take me home. He started the car. Neither of us spoke on the drive back. When we arrived, I got out without looking at him. Mom, please, he called after me. I didn't answer. Inside my house, I sat on the edge of the bed and looked around at the life I thought I'd lived. 41 years of loyalty, of compromise, of believing in the man beside me. It had all been a performance. And now that I knew the truth, one thing was clear. I was done being the woman who cried in silence. Whatever came next, it would not be forgiveness. It would be reckoning. For 3 days, I did nothing. I didn't call Derek back. I didn't answer his messages. I watched him pull into my driveway twice from the upstairs window and leave again when I didn't open the door. I let the phone ring until it stopped, then ring again. 41 years of loyalty had trained me to always respond, to always fix things. This time I chose silence. Not the silence of fear. The silence of calculation. I slept little, but I was no longer pacing or crying. Something inside me had shifted. Grief had burned itself out, leaving behind a cold, steady clarity. I replayed everything Derek had told me, not as a wife or a mother, but as a witness. Fake death. Stolen identity. Hidden assets. This wasn't betrayal. This was a crime. On the 4th morning, I woke before dawn and knew exactly what I was going to do. I took a long shower, letting the hot water ground me. I dressed carefully, choosing clothes that made me feel like myself again, not the widow everyone pitied. When I looked in the mirror, I saw someone older, yes, but sharper. Awake. I was done crying. Now I was thinking. I drove downtown to a building I'd passed 100 times and never noticed. 3rd floor, frosted glass door, a simple sign in black letters, private investigations. The man behind the desk was in his 60s, thinning hair, sharp eyes. He looked up when I entered and studied me without speaking. I need to find someone, I said, sitting down without waiting to be invited. He leaned back. Is he missing or hiding? Hiding, I replied. And legally dead. That got his attention. I told him everything. Not the emotions, not the years of marriage, but the facts. The accident. The closed casket. The new name. The house. The children calling him Grandpa. I showed him the photos I'd taken. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he nodded slowly. If what you're saying is true, this goes beyond cheating. This is identity fraud and financial deception. It will take time. It will cost money. I can pay, I said. I want proof. Bank records, property records, fake documents, everything. He named a number. I didn't flinch. I wrote the check. I want the truth documented, I said. Not suspected. Proven. He smiled faintly. I can do that. Over the next week, I watched from the edges of my own life. I returned to the sage greenhouse at different hours, wearing hats and sunglasses, sitting in my car like a stranger. I learned his schedule. He left every morning at the same time. He returned in the evening. Weekends were for the children. Sundays for church. A good man, the neighbors would have said. I watched the woman touch his arm the way I used to. I watched him smile with the ease of someone who believed his past was buried. It wasn't. The investigator called me 7 days later. I have enough for a full report, he said. You should come in. The folder he handed me was thick, heavy, real. Fake birth certificate issued years after my husband was supposedly born. Bank accounts opened under the false name with nearly $2 million transferred before the accident. Utility bills and tax records tying him to 2 households for over 20 years. And then the last page, phone records. Multiple calls, regular, long, between my husband and my son before the accident, after the funeral, during the months I thought I was alone. Derek hadn't just known. He had stayed involved. I closed the folder slowly. Thank you, I said. As I walked out of that office, something settled inside me. This was no longer about rage or revenge. It was about dignity, about truth, about refusing to be erased. Quietly, they thought I would mourn forever. Quietly, they thought my silence meant weakness. They were wrong. The storm hadn't passed. It had only just begun. I didn't confront Derek right away. That was the hardest part. Every instinct in me wanted to scream, to throw the evidence on the table and demand answers. But anger rushes. Strategy waits. And for the first time in my life, I chose patience over emotion. I took the folder home and read every page slowly. Bank transfers, dates, amounts, accounts opened under a name that didn't exist. Documents signed while my husband was supposedly dead. Everything was neat, organized, planned. This had never been a panic decision. It had been calculated. I made an appointment with an attorney the next morning, not the kind who handled wills or real estate. I needed someone who understood fraud, financial crimes, identity theft. She was direct, sharp, no wasted words. What you're describing is a criminal conspiracy, she said after reviewing the documents. Your husband committed identity fraud and financial theft. Your son aided and benefited. You're entitled to restitution, and there's strong ground for criminal charges. I felt a strange calm listening to her. What do you need from me? I asked. A confession would help, she replied. Especially from your son. We also need proof of asset transfers and forged authorizations. If we have that, the case is airtight. I already knew where those documents would be. Derek kept an office at the Marine Supply Warehouse. He'd once given me a spare key years ago for emergencies. I'd never used it until now. But first, I needed him to talk. I called him that afternoon. Mom, he answered immediately. Are you okay? I've been so worried. I'm tired, I said, letting my voice soften. I don't want to fight anymore. I just need to understand everything so I can move forward. There was relief in his breath. Of course, Mom. Anything you want to know. Let's have lunch tomorrow, I said. Somewhere quiet. He agreed without hesitation. That night, I placed a small recorder in my purse. I practiced keeping my hands still. I rehearsed my questions until they sounded like curiosity instead of accusation. At lunch, I listened. I let him talk. I asked when the plan started, how the money was moved, who signed what, where the proceeds from the sales had gone. Each answer came easily to him now, unguarded, confident that I was still his mother, still safe. He didn't notice the recorder. He didn't notice that every word was sealing his fate. While we ate, my attorney and the investigator were already at work. With the evidence I'd provided, they secured emergency access to financial records. The transactions told the rest of the story: forged signatures, unauthorized sales, funds wired into accounts Derek controlled. By the time lunch ended, the trap was closed. That afternoon, my attorney filed the complaint with the district attorney. Fraud, forgery, financial exploitation, identity theft. 2 hours later, she called me. The case has been accepted. Warrants are being prepared. I sat alone in my living room when the call ended. The house was quiet. No music, no television, just the ticking clock on the wall. I thought of the woman I'd been 6 months ago, crying into an empty pillow, begging a dead man to return. That woman wouldn't have survived this moment. But I was no longer her. I didn't feel joy or triumph. I felt resolved. The truth was no longer mine alone. Soon it would belong to the law. The first call came at dawn. It wasn't Derek. It was my attorney. "They've issued the warrants," she said. "Your son was taken into custody early this morning." No resistance. I closed my eyes and let the words settle. Somewhere across the city, Derek was being handcuffed, read his rights, led into a car in front of neighbors who once admired him. The weight of that didn't feel like victory. It felt like inevitability. An hour later, my phone began to ring. Derek. Over and over. I didn't answer. Then a message from his wife, short, shaking. "What did you do?" I set the phone face down and made coffee. By noon, the news had spread through the family. Cousins, old friends, people who had stood beside me at the funeral, who had hugged me and said I was strong. Now they were calling to ask questions they didn't want answered. I ignored them all. At 2 in the afternoon, my attorney called again. "There's something else," she said. "The identity he's using, Robert Miller, it's being formally invalidated. The accounts under that name have been frozen. He has nowhere to hide." That was the moment I knew I needed to see him. Not to argue, not to explain, but to end it. I drove back to the quiet street with the sage greenhouse. I parked directly in front this time. I didn't hide. I didn't watch from a distance. I walked to the door and rang the bell. It was the woman who opened it, Valerie. She looked at me with cautious politeness, the kind reserved for strangers. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see Robert," I said. "It's urgent." She hesitated, then nodded. "He's in the backyard." She stepped aside. He was standing near the fence, tools in his hands, sleeves rolled up. For a second, he didn't see me. Then he turned. The recognition was immediate. "Margaret," he whispered. I held out the envelope. "These are legal documents," I said calmly. "You need to read them." His hands trembled as he took the papers. His eyes moved quickly across the page. I watched the color drain from his face. "What is this?" he asked. "What did you do?" "I did nothing," I replied. I told the truth. He looked past me toward the house. "Does she know?" I raised my voice just enough. "She knows now." Valerie appeared behind him, confusion on her face. "What? What's happening?" He didn't answer. "I'm his wife," I said. "His legal wife. We were married for over 40 years. The man you know as Robert Miller doesn't exist." The silence that followed was unbearable. Valerie stared at him. "Is this true?" He closed his eyes. She stepped back as if the ground had shifted beneath her feet. "You said you were widowed," she whispered. "You said you had no one." "I had someone," I said. "Me." He felt his knees on the concrete. "Margaret, please. I can explain." "No," I said. "You've explained enough. You chose deception. You chose theft. You chose to erase me." Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. "They're coming," I said. He looked at me, horror in his eyes. "For the years we shared. For what we were." I stopped, but I didn't turn around. "What we were was real to me," I said. "That's why you'll never understand what you destroyed." I walked away as the sound of approaching sirens grew louder. I didn't look back when the police pulled up. I didn't watch them lead him away. Daylight had finally reached the truth, and nothing built on lies survives the light. Richard died 3 weeks later. Not in the dramatic way people imagine, not in a courtroom or in handcuffs. He suffered a heart attack in the holding facility while awaiting formal charges. The call came early in the morning, calm and procedural, as if informing me of a missed appointment. "He passed at 5:20 a.m., the voice said. "You're listed as next of kin." For a long moment, I said nothing. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel sorrow. What I felt was distance, as if the man they were describing no longer belonged to my life in any meaningful way. "Cremate him," I said finally. "Scatter the ashes at sea. No service." There was a pause. "Are you certain?" "Yes." He'd already taken enough from me. He wasn't taking one more performance. The legal process moved forward without him. The invalid identity was erased. The accounts were returned to their rightful status. The assets that had been hidden, sold, or transferred under false authority were recovered and redistributed by the court. What was stolen came back to where it belonged. Derek accepted a plea deal. He was sentenced to prison time for financial fraud and forgery. Not a lifetime, but long enough to understand the cost of his choices. We spoke once after the sentencing. It wasn't forgiveness. It was clarity. "I love you," I told him. "But love doesn't erase consequences." He nodded. For the first time, he didn't argue. Months passed. The house felt different, lighter. I redecorated, not to erase memories, but to claim space. I returned to the hobbies I'd abandoned years ago. I traveled with friends. I laughed without guilt. I slept through the night. Grief hadn't destroyed me. Silence had. And truth had saved me. One afternoon, I visited the cemetery where a stranger lay beneath my husband's name. I stood there briefly, not to mourn, but to close the door on the woman I used to be. That grave didn't hold my husband. It held my innocence. I left without looking back. Today, my life is quieter, smaller in some ways, stronger in all the ways that matter. I no longer confuse loyalty with self-erasure. I no longer believe love requires silence. I learned that dignity is not granted by marriage or blood. It is claimed the moment you refuse to be lied to any longer. And I learned that even after betrayal, even after years of deception, it is never too late to choose yourself. That choice changes everything.